Wherever you are around the world, welcome to Unheard Stories. I am Lubna Hassaniya and I'm joining you from beautiful Southern California. My guest today is actor and producer Tony Shalhoub. I would like to start by welcoming the dignitaries sitting on the call. We have His Excellency Gabriel Issa, former Ambassador of Lebanon to the United States, our Chargé d'Affaires Wael Hashim at the Embassy of Lebanon in Washington, D.C., Councillor Mirna Khawli, Councillor Ghassan Abdel Khaliq. We have the Honorable Judge James Kado and the Honorable Judge Tony Raphael. We are also happy to have with us Sarah Diligenti, Executive Director at the Alliance Française de Washington. And thanks to everyone in the audience for joining the conversation. At the age of 16, Sophie Shalhoub was not going to let the circumstances bring her down, no matter how terrible they were. She knew she had to make some courageous decisions to save her life and that of her 3 young siblings. Sophie Shalhoub was born in Mount Lebanon at perhaps the worst time in the history of the Middle East, when the Ottoman Empire ruled and ravaged the land, stealing every resource and impoverishing the people for over 400 years. Her father was killed in World War I after he was conscripted into the Ottoman army in 1914. 3 years later, her mother passed away. Being the only source of life to her young siblings, Sophie Shalhoub found herself skipping her teenage years altogether and diving right into hardship. The tragic situation was exacerbated when swarms of locusts swept through the region, stripping the land from its green color and strewing it with famine and death. Sophie made the decision to cross with her siblings to Europe, then board the ship and cross the Atlantic all the way to Ellis Island in New York Harbor. Joe Shalhoub, her youngest sibling, was only 10 years old, and the trip took 3 months. They then set out from Ellis Island, seeking Wisconsin, where they had some relatives. Sophie Shalhoub and her siblings had to be separated into the homes of different relatives. Years later, with hard work and determination, Joe Shalhoub was able to create his own success and start his own family in Wisconsin. He married Helen Sarouji, a second-generation Lebanese American, whose family history is also riddled with loss and tragedy. Together, they had 10 children. And my guest today, Tony Shalhoub, is their number 9. Tony was born in Green Bay, Wisconsin. He graduated with a master's degree from the Yale School of Drama and became known for his performance on stage and screen. He has earned 54 nominations and scoring 16 wins. He won the Tony Award for Best Actor in a Musical for his performance in The Band's Visit on Broadway in 2018. He also appeared on Broadway in Conversations with My Father, Golden Boy, The Odd Couple, and The Heidi Chronicles. His successful film career scored him roles in movies such as Big Night, which won him an award in 1996. Other movies include The Siege and Spy Kids. Tony also has an acclaimed career on TV with roles such as Antonio Scarpacci, the Italian immigrant on the NBC sitcom Wings, or Adrian Monk, the brilliant detective in the USA Network series Monk, which won him 3 Primetime Emmys. He also won a Primetime Emmy for his role as Abe Weissman on Amazon's The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Now, the success story of Tony stands as a testament to the unbreakable spirit of humanity and how, with peace, time, and space, creativity is awakened and the human potential is unlocked. Let's get started. Tony Shalhoub, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, Tony.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today. Tony, during your Tony Award acceptance speech, you addressed the children of immigrants saying, "May we, their descendants, never lose sight of what they taught us." Tony, what is it that you never wanted to lose sight of that your father taught you?
Oh, well, so a large number of things, really. Certainly a very strong work ethic, the importance of family, and keeping family united, and tolerance and patience, all of the things that they had to reach down and demonstrate when they were younger and going through such difficult times. And I think another thing that I gleaned from them was just the kind of the willingness and ability to adapt to changes and to different unexpected and not always pleasant circumstances, and to make the best of a difficult situation.
Yeah. So their teachings truly, help us build on their own experiences. And at the same time, they keep us anchored, to what is important in life.
Right.
Tony, you were presented with the Lebanon's Migrant Medal on January 6th of this year by the Embassy of Lebanon in DC. First of all, congratulations. Well deserved. How do you think your parents would have reacted to the recognition, Tony?
Oh, I think they would have been pleased, and I think of it as an honoring of them, not so much me. I mean, I was, I'm a descendant of immigrants, but my father and my mother's parents, went through this strife and difficulty of making the journey and starting over. So I would almost hope that they would understand that I accepted this award on their behalf.
Yes, and they would have been so proud of you. You definitely brought them back a gentle breeze from the old country.
Yes.
Tony, your mother was born in Wisconsin. It was her grandfather, Ruko Saruji, who left Mount Lebanon in the 1890s. Knowing that, and the fact that your father was only 10 years old when he came to Wisconsin, how much of the Lebanese heritage were they able to introduce you to?
Well, actually, my father was to be precise, he was 8 when he came.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
The youngest of 5 siblings, and the oldest of those, his oldest sister was already living here. She had come with their grandmother.
Mm.
And I think the story goes that she had come to visit to make the trip with her grandmother a number of years before my father and his siblings, but the war broke out, and then they were not able. His oldest sister and his grandmother were not able to go back, so they had to stay, and then sent for the others later, after my father's parents passed away.
So yes, go ahead.
What was your original question? Sorry.
I said, how were they able to introduce you to the Lebanese heritage?
Oh, of course, sure, certainly. I mean, the food was always a big part of our and still is, really. And my father, even though he was very young when he left there, had very vivid and good memories, mostly good memories of it. Always dreamed of going back, although he never was able to go back.
And was there any Arabic spoken around the house?
Oh, sure. My parents and my grandparents, my mother's parents, spoke it a lot, and but there was not a big push for us to learn it. I wish we had, but there was so much. There was a big emphasis on assimilation, and so a lot of times they were in terms of their offspring, they were trying to embrace what was here and kind of leave the past in the past.
A good approach, yes. Tony, a family of 10 children is a big family by anyone's standards. I am sure there were no dull moments around the house, were there?
We aspired to dull moments, but we had none.
Okay. It was always buzzing, the house.
It was chaotic, but it was fun, and it was I don't know, I wouldn't wonder if it's why I became an actor in the first place, because I always had, from my first memory, really, always had kind of a built-in audience there. It was always a standing room only.
Yes. And just to imagine your family around the dinner table, Tony, or watching a game on television, right? I'm guessing you didn't get too many dinner invitations as a family, did you?
No, we didn't. Strangely enough. And we didn't go to, we rarely, if ever, went to any restaurants. It just was not, first of all, how could one accommodate us all? But also, my father couldn't really afford to do that. It was, we did it. It was a very, very special occasion when we did it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Tony, a major event happened when you were only 6 years old, and that marked the beginning of a lifelong journey in acting. Can you share the story with our audience?
Oh, when I was 6, you mean?
Yes.
Right. Well, one of my older sisters, Susan, who's still an actress today, she was in high school, and they were doing a musical. They were doing King and I, and the teachers, the directors of that production must have asked it was an all-girls school, and they must have asked the girls to, bring in their younger brothers and sisters because they needed kids. Obviously, that show has a lot of children in it. And so I was recruited to be in this show. I don't remember being asked if I wanted to do it specifically, but I was commandeered to be in it. And it was, my first introduction to live theater and being on a stage. And I just remember it as being a strange but interesting experience. And I think maybe that's when the hook was set.
Yes, the spotlight, the attention you got while on stage, right?
I suppose.
And the reaction.
I had to wear a strange costume, we were the children of Siam, and weird, makeup, and these kind of sparkly costumes and weird shoes, and I guess it, is the first, sort of, transforming and pretending, but in a structured way, not in a way children just do random play.
Yes, a fun experience. Your father was against having a TV for you in the house, but your mother loved music and theater. So, and did you find yourself compensating with your siblings by putting on shows for the family?
We were always performing for each other and making up skits and making up stories, and a number of my siblings were very good, musicians, mostly self-taught. So there was a lot of singing and music around the house, and play acting and performing for each other.
Yeah. That must have been fun. When did you start looking at acting as a career, Tony? When did you start thinking of it as a serious thing?
I guess it wasn't really. Not until I think I was at the Yale Drama School, graduate school. Even in college, even though I enjoyed it and I majored in theater communications, I wasn't kind of sensing that it would be a viable career. It was something that I was interested in, and I didn't know, maybe I would be a teacher, which interested me. But once I got accepted at the drama school, and then I was fully immersed in it, and for that 3-year program, then it really started to that's when the coin dropped, and I started to, because I was with all of these very talented people, not just actors, but writers, playwrights, directors, designers, and the bar was raised, and we were starting to understand that those students that had gone before us, were having success and having careers in their pursuits, whether it was in the theater or film, or all three things. And so that's when, then it started to become, well, maybe this is actually possible. And then that's when the that's when I sort of focused my energy
Yes.
a lot more there.
So the atmosphere, the competition, and the watching your peers doing great things, that was inspiring.
And as I was leaving Yale, as I graduated, and a couple of us were asked to join a theater in Cambridge, Massachusetts, the American Repertory Theater, which was just starting out, and that was we were asked to become company members, resident members, and that too really cemented it. Then I knew that I was not just doing it, but I was actually getting paid for it, and
Yeah.
I had my actor's equity card, my union card, and so, and I mean, we weren't certainly making a lot of money, but we weren't. That wasn't the main goal. The main goal was to continue to do the kind of work that we were trained to do, and to work with, you know, talented people, and to grow as actors. And so I stayed there for 4 seasons, for 4 years.
Mm.
So, by the time I left there to try my hand in New York, I was already 30, probably, after all those years of school, 4 years
Sure.
in the theater, in the regional theater. So I just felt like I had my feet under me by that time. Of course, there's never any guarantees at any
Yes.
point, at any time along the way. There's always that potential for you to just stumble or just drop off the face of the earth there. But I was fortunate. I just had certain breaks at certain moments, and one thing led to another.
And you were in tune. So that's why you noticed these breaks, because you were in tune and you had the good intention of growing with your career more than focused on making money, for example. You wanted to grow.
Right. And I didn't have, I wasn't married, and I didn't own anything. I didn't really, I lived basically out of a suitcase and rented apartments, which was a little bit of the gypsy life, which is what I wanted. I wanted to focus more on the work. And, it's that old adage of what luck is, opportunity colliding with preparation, preparation colliding with opportunity. And that's how it felt like it was unfolding for me.
Yes. And you were there to grab it.
And be, again, a lot of luck, and a lot of things fell into place the right way, just in a random fashion. To explain it, it's just.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all that with us, Tony. Now, the world just celebrated International Women's Day. And you were born in the 50s, and back then women were not on an equal footing with men. But you grew up surrounded by strong and driven women, from your mother, who raised this beautiful family of 10 children, to your 6 sisters. And of course, there was Sophie and her heroic story in the background. What is the most rewarding benefit of growing up in such an environment?
Well, it felt very balanced. It was, I kind of felt like there were, much like in the story of Maisel and Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, there's a few strong, female characters that really grab life, by the horns, and don't just settle into the expected role. Certainly, my aunts, all of my aunts, certainly my father's siblings. He had 3 sisters. They were all very formidable, and my sisters, they were taught and embraced. They were taught to be advocates for themselves, and to be strong. And to this day, they're all, very, very, they're powerful.
Yeah.
And confident. And I love that.
Mm.
We try to instill that in our daughters. I have two daughters.
Yes.
And
That's great.
absolutely important.
Yes. And your sister Susan actually kind of paved the way for you in your acting career. She was pursuing her own before you, right?
Very much so. And at a much younger age.
Yes.
She, right out of high school, went to Pittsburgh. There was a school there, Pittsburgh Playhouse. And she was, I think, just 18. And it was a kind of a bold move. I mean, I think certainly in my father's eyes was like, whoa, wait a minute. This is, I don't want, my daughter who's not even 20 to be kind of leaving the nest and going, what about those theater people? What about those characters? And but she made the move. She was determined and she did well. And she, like you say, she paved the way for me, certainly. So by the time I was making that choice, my father was resigned to the fact that things turned out okay. So he was more accepting.
He had to transition. Now, in the Amazon Prime comedy, Tony, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, you played the role of Abe Weissman, the Jewish professor of mathematics at Columbia University, and the father of Miriam Maisel. The fact that the show was set in the 50s and the 60s, around the time you were growing up, did that make you feel connected with the show?
Absolutely. I love that period. I mean, I love doing things. I love working in the period of like the 1940s too, which I've done. But when I read this, it really resonated. And then once I started to see we did the pilot before we knew the show was going to be picked up. Seeing the design, the costumes and the sets and the how the kitchen was, outfitted, and all of these things were so recognizable to me. And I felt very, very, there was a kind of a nostalgia pull for me. And I saw my father somewhat in this character, even though my father was not a professor, but that similar role. And at that time, like my father, because he had older, as I was growing up, older siblings, and who were having young children. There were a lot of parallels.
Yes.
And seeing how the character of Midge, in the title character of Maisel, how she was breaking the mold and really, willing and determined to kind of carve her own way in the world.
Setting new standards. Well, let me tell you, Tony, I was able to connect with many scenes from that show, although I grew up thousands of miles away. There is one scene in particular that I'll always remember, Tony, is when your daughter in the show, Miriam, who was at the time a divorcee with 2 kids, living with her parents in her parents' house. And after being out all night, she comes home real late. And she opens the apartment door, and when she sees that the lights, everything's dark, she feels relieved because she didn't want you to see that she was coming home so late. And then she flicks the lights on, and here you are, sitting with Rose, her mother, in the dark, looking anxious, faces, angry faces on, and eyes wide open, looking straight at her. I mean, the sight of you was priceless in that scene. I loved it. It brought back memories from my past.
Yes, well, mine too. And it brought back memories of being a parent and waiting for my daughter to come home late.
Yes.
Yeah. In fact, there's a line in that scene where it's because we're so upset with her. And, and I say, and we'll talk about the wet towels on the floor, in the room. And when my daughters saw that episode, they thought that I improvised that line because that was a constant refrain in our house. We had hardwood floors upstairs, and I was always yelling at them about not leaving wet towels on the floor. And they thought that I just threw that line in there. Of course I didn't. It was scripted, just coincidentally. So
that's
our
fine.
writers had that same experience with their father, I guess.
Yes. Tony, the 1960s was a decade of revolution. So many things were shifting in politics, in human rights, in women's rights. How difficult was it to embody the character of Abe Weissman, the stoic, rigid scholar of a father, and impersonate him over 5 seasons as he goes through the transition himself?
Yeah, it was interesting. I thought our creators did a very smart thing by starting the series in the late 50s, knowing that if it did run, that we would be transitioning into the 1960s. And because the main character, Midge, is going through such a transformation, and then subsequently all of the other characters in response to her change, we're all experiencing change as the culture is shifting. So it was all very in line. But I do remember that period in my own life. It wasn't difficult for me to key into, because I remember very specifically my own father, having to go through a change, kind of a early retirement, and trying to reinvent his life, and how difficult that was. And things were sort of status quo. They were the way they were for a long time, and then they shifted, and everybody, some adapted better than others, of course. But there were a lot of men of that period, especially because the women were gaining strength and confidence. A lot of men were going through midlife crises, like Abe has to do. Certainly true in my father's situation. So I had markers and reference points to draw from.
Yeah, he was becoming very disenchanted with everything around him, his job, his family, very doubtful of everything. And, his kids weren't sharing everything with him either, right? And at one point, we see him shout out. I mean, you stood in the middle of the family room and you shout out, "I still control this house," as he tries to restore his self-confidence. I thought that revealed all the frustration of the era.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
He comes to a major understanding there in that second or third season, where he discovers that his daughter and his son, Noah, that they're not the people he thought they were. They're not the people that he thought he raised. And that's unsettling. The sands are shifting under his feet, and that's, I think, the dilemma of all, the plight of all parents. In a way, you discover, well, the world encroaches, and your influences only extends so far, and then your children are who they are, in spite of whatever you plan or try to do with them. And ultimately, I believe that Abe, at least he attempts to make peace with that, and to kind of embrace the idea that maybe they're better than he, even though they're different, maybe they're actually better than he thought. Certainly, he learns that Miriam is much stronger than probably he even is.
And the fact that he quit his tenure job at Columbia, that shows you the pull was working on him too, to go to the other side.
And it's humbling, because as we see in season 4, I think it's season 4, he and Rose become dependent on her. She's now taking care of them, and there's a role reversal there. And he's not making as much money as his daughter, and he's doing a different job that he's liking, but he doesn't have the income from and the security from Columbia or from Bell Labs. He's brought down a few pegs.
True. Yeah. Well, Tony, what does it take to be committed for such a long time with a series like The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel? I mean, you have to play a particular role sometimes for years, right? What kind of challenge does that impose on you?
It has its challenges, but when the writing is as good as we had on Maisel and even on Monk, we were blessed with great writers. And interestingly enough, neither of these series were network series where you work 8 or 10 years with 24 episodes a year. In Monk we did 16 episodes a year. In Maisel we did 8, 9, or 10 episodes depending, and so that doesn't eat up all of your time. I was able to do other things while I was doing Maisel. I was doing the band's visit during the hiatus periods, and I could do a part in a film or whatever. So it has more benefits than it has a downside, I guess, certainly.
Yeah.
Especially with the writing, I guess if you're unfortunate, you're getting a series where you're called on to do just one thing or sort of play one color only, that could be frustrating and daunting. But when you have this kind of writing where they develop the characters and the characters go through transitions and reinvent themselves, and then it's never boring.
Yeah. So does the successful show really come down to the script, Tony? To
Everything
the writing
comes down to the script. It's always with television, with plays, it all starts. We're just interpreters of the material, and it all starts with the written word. I mean, those are the people, the writers I really, really admire, because I'm not starting with a blank page, blank canvas. I'm working off of someone else's effort and someone else's artistry and craft. And whereas a writer is staring at a screen that has nothing on it, or a blank page, and they're kind of creating something out of thin air. Basically, it's something I cannot do, and I really admire.
Yes. Now, like you mentioned, for almost 2 years, you were doing two things. You were working on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and at the same time, you were working on the Broadway musical, The Band's Visit. And so on one hand, you have Abe Weissman, right? The Jewish mathematician living in the 50s in New York. And on the other hand, you have this Egyptian general, Tawfiq Zakaria, living thousands of miles away. How is it possible to alternate and maintain uniqueness in their roles? They're two different roles.
Yeah. So different. So actually so different, and yet certain they intersect in certain aspects, I guess. It helps when you have, again, I go back to these great scripts, and in the case of Band's Visit, great music and a great story. A template. There was a movie made back in when was that? 09 or 010? 08 or 09, when that was an independent movie made about the story. It was not a musical, but a great film. And when you're surrounded by all of these great these other actors and musicians and all these other characters, it really helps it makes it easier to sort of drop into that world. And you just go with it. It's all there. It's all around you. It's and when it's done with such precision, it's there's not a I can create a certain amount for myself and for my character, but it helps when the clothes are of a certain feel and fit, and the physicality of the character kind of sometimes comes from the costume, and it was interesting compartmentalizing and bouncing back and forth between those two characters. They were both, fathers, and they're both serious, very serious guys, struggling in their different respective ways, and with their challenges and frustrations. So I found some parallels.
Yeah. And they are seemingly so different, but like you said, they have so much in common. Because when we think of that part of the world, our minds go straight to the conflicts going on and, eating at the fabric of the people, but we don't tend to accentuate the similarities. As far as the character is concerned, what are the overlaps between the two characters? What do they both strive to do while living their lives?
Well, they're striving to, in Tewfik's case, he's, I think in both cases, they're striving to hold on to something they feel is slipping away. In Tewfik's case, he's lost his son and his wife, and his job, his only connection to the world, as a conductor of this police orchestra, his job is in jeopardy. I mean, if this band is about to be disbanded if they screw up, they've made some mistakes, and they're about to be disbanded, and it's all he really has to hold on to. And in Abe's case, he's losing what he, was his comfort and his complacency, his what he thought his identity was. It's all in flux. It's all slipping away. So in that sense, they're each, holding on for dear life, and somewhat fearful of change. In Abe's case, he ultimately will embrace the change.
Yeah.
So I think these two men start from the same place. There's a lot at stake for both of them.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, we're all writing different versions of the same story, right, Tony? The human story.
Yes. And that's what, people ask, well, one is, a Jewish character and one is an Egyptian character. And that's going back to the writing again. Good writing is about the sort of universality of these stories and these characters, and how much we see, that person might be from a different country or of a different stripe, but there's a connection we can make because their problems are somewhat similar to our issues. And
now the band's visit was hailed by the Washington Post as the Broadway musical of the year, with the Broadway song of the year. And New York Times said the score feels as essential as oxygen.
Ooh,
right?
That's good.
Yeah, really good. Tony, what can you share about the music in the band's visit?
Oh, well, it's so beautiful and haunting. David Yazbek, who wrote the music and the lyrics, he really tapped into, again, he was working off of the story of the film. Was written and directed by Aaron Coloran, as an Israeli filmmaker. And David was, David, interestingly enough, is half Lebanese, half Jewish. So he was a perfect person to kind of bring these two worlds, try to bring these two worlds together through music. So there's the Arabic music that the Egyptian band plays, and there's the Israeli
Klezmer.
feeling, music. I fell in love with the music, and I still listen to it. I still listen to the soundtrack all the time. I feel like, again, here you have these two types of music, but they blend so well together there. And music is that thing. Music is the thing that we can all share, the unspoken common language for all of us.
It is a universal language. So true. And did you get to sing, Tony?
Did I get to sing in the musical?
Mm-hmm.
A little, yeah. People don't want to hear me sing too much, but I had to sing actually in Arabic and a cappella in Arabic. But it's interesting. I think in this story that the Dina, the character of the lead character in the Israel, this little Israeli town, the cafe owner, when she meets Tufik and they're talking, she's talking about how when she grew up, she was listening to Kulthum, So she's listening as an Israeli, is listening to, and watching movies, from Egyptian cinema and Omar Sharif. She becomes obsessed with Kulthum and Omar Sharif.
Yes.
So I just think it's so interesting how, that those things sort of
merge
and bring people together.
Mm-hmm. Well, Tony, you had just finished season 8 of the sitcom Wings, where you played Antonio Scarpacci, the Italian immigrant. When you were offered the role of Monk is a brilliant detective who suffers from OCD. And it took 3 years of casting calls by ABC and then USA Network to find the right person to play the role of Adrian Monk. And then they found you. You weren't so sure you wanted the part in the beginning. Why? What convinced you finally?
I wasn't sure that when I read the pilot that I was that suited to this part. My manager had given it to me and had sent it to me, and she just kept nudging me toward it. And and I read it and I said to her, Mary, I like it. I'm not sure I connect. She said, well, read it again, and you're more like this character than you even know. And she was right. And she also said, there were certain parts, certain things of the script when I originally read it that were, it was written in a way, it was a little more broad. It was, it was more, I think it was first conceived in the early going, almost like a Inspector Clouseau, kind of policeman, very sort of broad in that way. And I wasn't sure that was really what I was wanting to do. So my manager very wisely said, listen, you can talk to them. You can talk to the writers. You can talk to the network, sit down with them and explain to them what you feel, what you're connecting to, and what you would like to see tweaked a little bit. And I did that, and they were very open, and they understood that, and they made I wanted the comedy to kind of grow out of the pain of this guy, the question was there a world where the comedy and the sort of tragedy of the loss of his wife in a violent way and his disability, is there a world where these two things can coexist. So we can have fun with it, but not make fun
Of
of
it.
it, not make
Very
fun of the disorder, because it's a serious disorder that
Yes.
a lot of people to varying degrees all over the world, can suffer from, and it's disruptive to their lives and to their families. So we wanted to honor that, but still find, the some fun in it. And I think the writers did such a beautiful job of kind of tailoring it more and more to me and to my strengths.
Mm.
What I was trying to billboard, and what we were all trying to do really, was to illustrate how a person's liabilities or weaknesses or problems can become their strengths. How they can become how do you change a liability to an asset? And that was what Monk was trying to do, always trying to. Well, yes, he's obsessive, but that leads him to be more focused, and he has an attention to detail unlike him. And he's hyper sensitive to smells and to, you see, he has a different kind of vision, and that comes out of his disorder.
Yeah.
So yes, he's a little off, a lot off, but
Yeah.
he's also it's kind of his superpower too.
Yeah. Well, there are 2.5 million people in the US alone suffering from OCD, Tony, today. And, the character of Monk, like you said, gave them representation and brought awareness their way, which is excellent.
Yeah.
Tony, with Monk, you mixed, like you said, comedy with drama and also mystery. And it went over 7 years. 7 years. You were really committed.
It went 8 years.
8 years, really? Even better. You were also the executive producer, right? How was that experience?
That was something that when we were first, discussing my contract and so forth, that I really wanted to have more of a voice. Prior to that, I had been working, I did Wings, and I actually did a sitcom in between Wings and Monk, which only lasted a year, called Stark Raving Mad. And I had done other jobs, but I told them that, look, I really want to contribute. I want to, as more than just an actor, I want to, have a voice. I don't need to have, final say or final cut or any of that. But I would like to, I feel like I have enough experience and enough years under my belt that I can really bring something to the table other than just performance. And so they said, great. And that was part of that was, the discussions that I could have with the writers on a weekly basis.
Hmm.
And I was involved in guest casting. I was able to weigh in on that. And to really, I wanted to keep the tone of the show kind of consistent, and I didn't want it to kind of go all over the place. And I also was in the editing room. They allowed me to be in the editing room so I could work the material from not just my acting moments, but helping to carve other performances too. And because that was what I knew, that's what I was had been trained for, and what I had been, that was my job for all the years leading up to this. Mm-hmm. And so it was a real education. It was time consuming, of course, but I feel like I added to the added to the whole process.
I'm sure you did, Tony. And like so many of the other characters you portrayed, Monk is an emotionally driven character that is so real and so unique. And I've watched all 4 seasons of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and most of Monk, and I've experienced firsthand how you engage your audience. Sometimes, like I told you, through your silence, not even through words. And as someone who's watched your work also, I tell you, your comedy is brilliant, Tony. It manages, like you said, to make us laugh while we are completely immersed in the pains and sorrows of life. And we end up with these magnificent, iconic scenes and moments that are so powerful in their message, but yet so simple, right? Like the couple of ones we described before.
I guess I attribute so much to the writing. It's you can, if the writing isn't there, and I've been in positions where, the writing isn't quite up to, and then there's not much you can do with it. You can't.
Yes.
But if you have that, the support of all of the, all of those skill, years of experience and people who are really trying to break new ground and things like that. A lot of the work is done for you.
Yeah. And the outcome is brilliant at that point. Tony, I want to thank you really for being with us today and for giving us the opportunity to know you more. I think it's time to open the floor for Q&A. What do you think?
That'd be great. I'd like
Okay.
that.
Well, anyone in the audience who wishes to comment or ask Tony a question, please either leave it in the chat box or raise your hand using the reactions button on the bottom of the screen. Let me see who we have here. I have a question for you coming from Malik Rahbani. I'm going to ask you to unmute Malik. Please go ahead and introduce yourself first, Malik.
Hello, Mr. Tony. My name is Malik Rahbani. I'm an actor. And I have to say, growing up in Lebanon, you were an inspiration to me. And I really want to thank you so much for opening the doors for all of us. I have a question for you, sir, about your role as Frank Haddad, Agent Frank Haddad in Edward Zwick's amazing film, The Siege. Playing a Lebanese character of Lebanese origins, did you dive deep into your Lebanese roots to help you further build the role?
Oh, yes, very much so. I tried to connect to, to my upbringing, my family, all of the things that I had experienced when I was a child and in my teenage years and my 20s, with various family members, stories that I became familiar with, experiences experiences about what it was like when they first came in, feeling like an outsider. And I definitely, it's true. I think in a lot of my work, because I'm from such a big family, and not just my immediate family, not just my siblings, but extended family too, cousins and aunts and uncles, grandparents, and all of them they're all characters in their own right. They really are so unique and different. And so it gives me a lot to draw from, a deep, deep well to draw from. And I wanted this character to, what happens to this character? He's fully invested as an American, law enforcement person. He's devoted his life to that. And then this terrible thing happens, and his own son, in the story, his own son gets put in kind of an internment camp. And he feels betrayed. And so so all of the things from my past, and I had to bring to the forefront. It was a really, really challenging and rewarding role. I had to, work, of course, on the accent, but I also had to learn Arabic because I had to speak Arabic in the piece, and that was challenging.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Malik. Thank you. We have one from Talat Captain. He's asking, what is your favorite character you've ever played?
Oh boy.
Abe Weissman. Monk.
I don't know how to answer that. I've been so lucky in that I have played so many interesting. I have to say, I think the character I played in Big Night, I really liked that. I was proud of that. I've done roles in theater that they were at different times my favorite. I think it's just, I don't have a favorite, I guess is my answer. I'll tell you though, one of my favorites, I love my character in Galaxy Quest. That was great. And when I worked with the Coen brothers, both of those different characters in those two movies I liked. I did a small movie that not many people saw. It was post 9/11, and it was a movie called The Great New Wonderful. And I played a shrink in that. It was a movie that not many people saw, unfortunately, because I really think it's a fine movie. It's got great, Jim Gaffigan is in it, Maggie Gyllenhaal is in it, a lot of great people. Olympia Dukakis is in it. And it's not a big part. It's not a big movie, but it's something that just clicked for me. And I really, I just was, one of those things that you just feel like, well, I'm so proud of this. I wish more people could see it.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's out there somewhere.
Yeah. You have one from Thayane Aquino. She's saying, what are your upcoming projects?
I have a couple movies that are just little parts in great movies that I just did a year or two ago. One is, again, with Jim Gaffigan, a movie called Linoleum, a kind of fantasy kind of movie. And interestingly, I play another doctor to Jim in that. And that's a really interesting picture. And I did a movie that Eva Longoria directed, her first directorial effort, called Flamin' Hot, about a young Mexican janitor that worked, based on a true story, that worked at Frito-Lay and came up with the formula for Flamin' Hot Cheetos. And so that's an interesting movie called Flamin' Hot. And then we're going to do, I'm not sure if I'm doing a spoiler alert here, but we're doing a Monk 90-minute movie for streaming.
Oh, wow.
And we're going to start shooting that in May.
Yeah.
And it's Monk post COVID, so he's in trouble. So we're bringing everybody back, all of the characters.
Yes.
It'll be a 90-minute streaming thing.
Yes.
For Peacock.
Yes. And yes, and the season 5 of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, you promised it's coming out in April.
Sometime in April. We finished that in November, and it's coming out sometime in April.
Yes. Well, you have a question from our former Consul General to Lebanon to LA, Mirna Khawli. She's asking, which character was closer to your personality?
Of all the characters
all the characters you played.
My memory's not that good. I can't remember that far back. I guess there's aspects of all of them that are a part of me, I guess. I don't know how to answer that one.
Mm, mm, mm.
I try not to do characters that are too close to me. I try to avoid those. That's not really why I didn't become an actor to play myself, or to play aspects of myself, yes. To bring some of myself to it, yes. But when I in my training, was I because I was trained in the in the theater, the idea was to play characters that are unlike you, far from you, and to transform yourself. That was the challenge, and that's what I try to aspire to.
Yeah. Good, good. You have one from Jana Pirolozzi, and she's saying, would you ever do a short again?
Would I ever do a short?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Always based on the material. It's, if it's something that I connect to, and sure.
Yeah. Well, I have to ask you this question, Tony, because it's been requested by many, many people prior to the show. Please ask him, are you related to Omar al-Sharif? Because his last name is Michel Dimitri Shalhoub, and he is of Lebanese descent.
That's right.
Are you related to him?
No, I don't know if we are related. That he has the same last name. That was a very big clan, or is a very big clan in Lebanon. And but I met his grandson at in LA at an awards event, and he said that he told me that Omar Sharif told him that he thought we were related. He passed away before I got to meet him, but I like to think we are. I have to say, if you saw pictures of my father when he was young, he's looks very much like Omar Sharif.
Yeah, I saw that in Tawfiq's portrait as he was wearing his regalia, his blue suit. I saw a little bit of that there myself. Is your family originally from Zahle, do you know, in Lebanon?
Yes, from a little village called Abla, which is next to Zahle.
Okay.
I went to visit a few years ago.
How was it?
First time. Well, it was beautiful and so moving to go back to that. Well, we stayed in Beirut, but we took day trips all over the place. At a week, and we were able to go to Zahle and go to Abla, and it was stunning.
Yes, I'm sure it was, Tony. Thank you so much, Tony. So thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing your amazing story, past and present. And I have no doubt future chapters of great importance will be added to it too. Is there anything else you'd like to add before I wrap it up?
Well, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. It was really fun. The hour went very fast, didn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Tony. I want to thank all of you again in the audience for joining us today. The event will be uploaded to my YouTube channel and shared with all of you. Goodbye for now. Thank you for being here. See you next time. Bye, Tony.